Well, happy Father's Day, folks. Our passage today is probably one that's being preached in many, many churches today because it's about the prodigal son. And so you all know this story, right? You know the story. This younger son, he bucks up one day and tells his dad, I want my inheritance. I'm ready to be independent and live on my own. How many of you ever said that to your folks? I'm ready to be by myself, right? How many of you wish your children had said it? Right? Anyway, so you all know this story, but specifically when we look in verse 20, I want to start there for our sacred text today. And this is from the J.B. Phillips translation. So, this young man, in verse 20 says, so he got up and went to his father, but while he was still some distance off, his father saw him and his heart went out to him. And he ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. But his son said, Father, I have done wrong in the sight of heaven and in your eyes. I don't deserve to be called your son anymore. And his father stopped him right there and said to the servants standing around, hurry up. Get the best clothes and put them on him. Put a ring on his finger and shoes on his feet and get that calf we've fattened and kill it. And we're going to have a feast and a celebration. For this is my son. I thought he was dead and he's alive again. I thought I had lost him and he's found. And they began to get the festivities going. Hallelujah. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Now, this kid, he's probably in his late teens, maybe early 20s. He's for sure not old enough or wise enough, as we all know now, to be making these kinds of decisions, right? He doesn't even know how to really do the right thing all the time. But what he did know is he wanted part of his wealth. He wanted that money. He wanted his inheritance. Now, you all know what happened, right? He takes that money, he goes off. He's living the high life, partying, buying drinks, I'm sure, for all his friends, eating at the best restaurants, sleeping in the nicest places, just having a good old time. And then one morning, probably a morning, he wakes up broke and hungry and homeless. Right? We knew that was going to happen. That's obvious from the way that story starts, that that's what's going to happen to this young man. And he is so hungry that he takes a job, this young Jewish man takes a job working on a pig farm, feeding the pigs and cleaning out the pig pen. Anybody been around a pig farm ever? If you're on Highway 84 on the way to, Highway 87 on the way to between Lubbock and Canyon, Texas, in Tulia, Texas, there is a pig farm there that is 25 miles from the highway, but that will stop your car dead on the freeway. I'm telling you, that is a smell that is a smell that you will never forget your whole life. Last time I drove that highway, it's been 40 years ago, and I can still smell that smell. So this young man of wealth and prosperity, took everything he had and he squandered it, made bad decisions, woke up slopping the pigs and cleaning out their pen. And he looked at them and he said, oh my goodness, even these animals are eating better than I am. And so what'd he do? Went back to his dad's house. That's what we read in verse 20. He went to his father. The rest of this story involves his older brother. His older brother, maybe still even as young as he is, maybe a teenager, early 20s. Mad, though. He's mad. He's so upset that this younger brother was allowed to leave with all that money and not have any more responsibilities. I'm the oldest in my family. I have 3 little brothers. I can relate to this guy right here. How come I'm doing all the work and they get to go have all the fun? Right? He was mad. His brother got to do whatever he wanted. There was no punishment. no consequences. This young man, this older brother, was so focused on the mistakes of his younger brother that he forgot he was also a son of this wealthy man, that he was also blessed and highly favored. He was so enraged by his brother's actions and his father's response that he refused to be a part of the party. He stood outside. I can see him now. Can you see him now? With his hands crossed, kicking the ground. I can't believe he's back here. Spoiled brat, rotten kid. I can't believe. And Dad just fell on his neck and kissed him and welcomed him home. He didn't even wait for him to come and apologize. He ran down the road to meet him. Ooh, that barbecue smells good. Nope, I'm not going in there. I'm not going over there because I'm mad. I'd rather hold on to my anger. He didn't even think about the fact that his brother might have been dead, but was now alive. And that dad gave everything, his whole life for those boys. Built up that wealth, built up that family, built up that environment for those boys to grow up in. How many of you had fathers like this? Worked their whole lives to make sure you had a better life. How many of you are these dads? I can name you right now. Working hard to make sure your kids have a better life than you have, sacrificing yourself. Yeah, I see you. I see you. Making sure your kids had better than you had. Making sure that they went to church, that they knew God, that they went to school, that they had food and clothes and everything you need. And even when they walked up to you and said, you know what, I'm going to go live by myself for a while. I'm going to be independent now. I got this. I got this. Thanks for everything. By the way, could I get some money? None of this, folks, none of this happens by accident. Fathers don't create this kind of life for their children accidentally. There's planning around it. There's strategy. None of you in here who have done this for your children, you didn't just wake up one day and say, oh, let me see what kind of a comfortable, safe, healthy life I can create for my children. And there are other passages in here that talk about how a father should be with their children. Genesis 18:19 says, "For I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him." Jesus followers. That's one of the strategic objectives of the Horizon Texas Conference, is to multiply Jesus followers. Y'all, it didn't start with our conference. It started back there with Abraham and the things that God did for Abraham to bring people into the world in the Jewish faith tradition and then eventually into the Christian faith tradition. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it." You have to start when they're young, championing children and youth. That's another strategic objective of our conference and our denomination. You start when they're little. You start when they're little. Now, none of our littles showed up today for children's church, and that's okay. I hope they're with their dads somewhere having a nice Sunday morning. But every Sunday, we've got Sue, we've got Miss Vicki, and we've got Doug and other people who feed into the lives of the children that we bring here. And so that when they are old, they will not depart from what they've learned here. Deuteronomy says, "These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Keep talking to your children about the miracles and the love of God. Ephesians 6:4 says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." That's a hard one, right? I've never been a father, but I've had to do both jobs in my life with Tyler. And so sometimes I remembered this verse and sometimes I didn't. And then finally, and the thing I want us to focus on this morning is what it says right here in Luke 15 and verse 20. It talks about the quality, the character of this father. It says, "But while that young man was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. And he ran to his son and threw his arms around him and kissed him." His father didn't care that his son had wasted his inheritance. His father didn't even give that money a second thought, because he knew that his son, who he thought was dead, was alive. His father didn't care that his son had been in the mud and the filth with the pigs. He didn't even think about the fact that in their Jewish faith tradition, that young man was unclean and needed to be put into isolation for 7 days. And I can tell you right now, that boy needed a bath. His dad didn't care. He ran down the road. Y'all, I could barely run the washing machine. And he ran down the road to meet that boy and to gather him up and to hug him and kiss him on the neck and say to him, "Oh, I'm so glad that you're home." He did not care because his son, who he thought might be dead, was alive. His father didn't care who his son had loved, who he'd been with. He didn't care who his friends were. He didn't care what mess he'd left behind. He only cared that that boy was alive. That dad let go of every resentment, every standard, every requirement that he could have held over that boy's life. He let it all go, and he ran to him, and he gathered him up, and he loved him. I wonder, what are you holding on to in your life that keeps you from running as fast as you can to the people who need this kind of love? What kind of standard, what kind of requirement, what kind of recommendation is more important to you than someone that you see who needs Jesus? Who are you looking at? Who are you thinking about right now when I say this? That you think they're not deserving of God's love? When you see someone who's different than you are, what are you doing with that burning resentment that sits in your chest and turns your face red? Because folks, if we don't start to share the love of God with other people, we risk being like the older son, more focused on our own wants and needs and not focused at all on sharing the wealth of God's love. There was plenty. There was plenty. And that older boy forgot. He forgot he was also a beloved child. He forgot who his father was. He forgot that his brother could have been dead, but now they knew he was alive. Folks, if we don't put God's love into action in our lives, people could die without knowing the love of God. They could. And putting that love into action means you have to let go of things. And if we don't start to act like this father and go as fast as we can on the lookout to run to whoever might need Jesus, no matter what their condition, other folks could be lost. If we don't act like this father and run down the road to meet those folks who think that they don't belong here, if we can't put aside our own bias and our own bigotry and lay it at the foot of the cross, if we can't let go of the fact that we're afraid of people that we don't know and understand, and if we don't make our hearts soft enough to remember that we too once were desperately, desperately in need of salvation, And the people around us may be doomed to suffering, a suffering that we could have prevented. Folks, I want you to hear this. God's love is not pie. There are not a limited number of slices of God's love. There's enough for everybody. Folks, I look in the mirror some days and I weep that God loved me so very much in spite of my past, because I've been that young boy, living that high life, wasting money, not spending one single minute doing anything other than what I thought would make me happy. God's love rescued me when I didn't deserve it. God came running down the path in my life and snatched me up and brought me back into the family. God's love helped me escape from a death of my own making, even as I kept turning my back to God. And you know, you all tease me a lot because I cry. I cry when I think about what God has done for me. If you knew my sins, you'd understand the joy. You would know what these tears of joy are all about. Now, you don't know my sins, and I don't know yours, and I don't want to. I don't want to share. I don't want to hear that part. All right, I don't. That's not the nature of our relationship. That is our past. But God knows us all. God knows us intimately, and we know this, that as soon as we stopped turning away from God, God came running to us and snatched us up and gathered us back into our families and into this family. And there's not one human being walking the face of the earth. There is not one creation of God that doesn't deserve this kind of love, folks. And we have a choice, though. God gives us a choice. We can love like the older brother. We can practice that selfishness that becomes so destructive that it's no longer selfishness, but instead it's judgment and resentment. And it eats away. And the other thing is, if you love like that older brother and you hold on to those things, you're going to miss the barbecue. Our other choice is to love like this Father, without condition, without restraint. Love boldly, even when it makes no sense to us. And the great news in all of this, the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ, is that God's enormous and powerful love gives us the power and the strength and the wisdom that we need to let go of those things that keep us from loving. We don't even have to figure out how to do it ourselves. All we have to do is say, yes, Lord. And the very greatest blessing to me is that we get to do it together. All of us. Pray with me, please. Gracious God. Oh, help us to be like you, Lord. This picture of your love in our lives, God, help us to remember this when we see that person on the street, that person who's living with addiction and has no home and has no money and no food. God, help us to run as fast as we can and to meet them in the street. God, when we see that person whose skin doesn't look like ours or who loves in a way that we don't understand, God, help us to put aside everything and to love the way this Father loved. God, because we know that the Father in this story is you. And we know the boys in this story, these sons, who both made mistakes. Well, those are our lives, God. And give us the strength and the courage that it takes to come back to you and to say to you, I'm sorry. I want to do better. And God, as we leave this place today, help us to carry this with us, this intention to love boldly, to welcome people courageously, and to live as your beloved children. Amen.